And then if I tell you the final test is going to be when? When do I have the final test, Joey?
December 8th.
December.
What now?
December 8th.
Now Holly's telling me it's December 8th. Now you're doubting if I'm going to have it on the 8th, right? There's some doubt in your mind. Agreed? Well, we messed up test number 2. What makes you think test number 3 is going to be right? Agreed? You lose some credibility when you don't follow through on your agreements. So you're going to have to be careful to what you agree to, yes? And don't set up something you can't deliver. That's the challenge. Don't set yourself up for failure. Your credibility is on the line. So it's not a difficult model to understand, but it's a difficult model to hold up to. Right? Sometimes we want to give our employees more than we have, and that we got to resist that temptation. But when you don't keep your agreements, your credibility suffers. Big time. Right? And you're not going to promote openness, and you're going to decrease trust. So we want to make and keep agreements, establish some credibility. And I think if you build a long track record of credibility and trust, and you mess up from time to time, that's going to be okay. You've built a track record. It's when you don't have a track record that it's very, very important to build one. Right? And back to Tom. There was a period of some weeks where we didn't see Tom. He came every week, every Wednesday he would come, and someone had told us that Tom had passed away, and I went and looked up his obituary, which is a listing in the paper of their life, a little bit about them. Turns out this guy, I want to say, let's argue, I don't know the exact numbers, let's argue he was a 3-star general in the Army and never said a word about it. Never mentioned his military background nor his rank. Now, in the United States, for those who don't know, being a general, that's a big deal. Usually those guys go on TV shows and make big money writing books and this, that, and the other. Okay? And so he embodied this humble approach and not promoting who he was. And I remember that certainly stuck with me as an example of how to be. All right, one of the most difficult things in this class to understand is box 5, and it's really not that hard. Okay? What I'm getting at with box 5 there is think about how your people interact on a daily basis and build physical structures that encourage the behaviors you want. Now, this is a very simple concept. Right? If I want all my sales and marketing people to communicate and have very good relationship, I'll probably put them all together in the same place if possible. Same office area where they can easily walk to one another's offices and talk face-to-face and communicate. Right? Now you could argue maybe that the shipping people and the sales people, they don't really need to talk that much and communicate. I don't need them to be close to one another. But you could argue maybe shipping and receiving need to be close to by, they need to coordinate. Great. This is simply about creating a physical environment to encourage communication. That's all it's about. Okay. I've worked, and why did I put this in the model? I worked with companies that told me that how they had their building arranged made a huge difference in how people communicated. Okay. I worked with one company that had 3 buildings, and they were on 2 sides of a road. Okay? And it was always about what's going on in that building, what's going on in that building, and I was always finger pointing. Okay? And I worked with a company, a separate one, that had won the Texas Quality Award and was going after the Malcolm Baldrige Award, which is in your book, talked about in your book. I don't know if they ever won. If you can look up, the name escapes me at the moment, but they were a fairly up and coming company in the Garland area, and they decided to go from several separate buildings into one. And they bought this huge plot of land, and they said, if we ever expand, we're going to knock down that wall and keep going. Now, it's an ideal situation. Obviously, if you're huge, you couldn't do that. But what we're getting at here is, how do I create this physical environment to encourage the communication that I want? Okay? So that's what this is kind of talking about. Changes of physical locations or arrangement of people to encourage interaction, communication, cooperation, teamwork, and decision making. That creates a desired culture. Okay? That's what it's getting at. One of our engineering buildings here is a great example. Okay? If you wanted to have civil and mechanical, electrical, chemical, industrial all communicate and collaborate on research, what would you do?
Put them together.
Put them together. You go to some places, now granted, this is not always able to happen easily. If you go to Georgia Tech, which I've been there one time, they've got separate buildings for industrial engineering, separate building for mechanical, separate building for chemical, which is all well and good, but when am I going to run into a chemical engineer if I'm industrial? Never. I'm not in that building. I'm not going to see him. Okay. Would it be better to have faculty located at various buildings so they would talk to one another? Maybe not easier to do. One of the things that's nice about our building here is you have a lot of different faculty of different disciplines in the same building, and you can easily talk to one another. If I want to go find a mechanical engineer, I got to walk about 40 steps, which is kind of nice. Okay? So you're kind of creating that environment. This also goes, when we talk about teamwork next time, we're going to talk about cross-functional teams where I'll use the example of Chrysler, where they're trying to put this minivan together, and so they got a design and manufacturing and sales and marketing and finance and accounting and all the different people they needed to create that van and put them all together on one floor of a building. Go. Make this van happen. And so they created this team and they put them all together in the same place, and you're able to try to get this communication and teamwork going. It's a lot easier to do if you're in the same place. When I was a grad student, I was on the first floor, my boss was on the third floor. I was in a secure computer room, if you're old enough to remember computer rooms where they had a false floor, and all the wires were underneath the floor, and you had to have magnetic card access to get in them and all that. That's where my office was, only because that's where they had extra desks to put the grad students, and that's where I was at. Well, my boss was on the third floor. I mean, it would have been great if I was right next to her, and I could have been right there. We would have talked a lot more, but I was essentially in some dungeon, and where I wouldn't communicate with but other grad students who were on other projects. Didn't help. Okay. And that's just a simple observation I made many years ago doing some research on this culture change that would help you. One of the things that happens, and what I'm getting at here, changing the physical environment is a clear sign to everyone that there's no going back to the old ways, and that the steering team, which is the management team, is serious about changing. Okay, let's argue that you're going to change the layout. What made me think about this example, companies that if you're a manufacturing background and the old departmental setup, and we were going to lean. We were going to lean work cells. And so what they did is they tore down the walls, repainted the floor, repainted all the equipment, put new lights in, new ceiling tiles, and rearranged the entire floor. And of course, if you know lean, it was all in horseshoes and circles. And so those horseshoes and circles created teams. And so I had to create an entirely new environment. All the old departments were gone. All the walls were gone that were there. All the old equipment was now painted. Floors were painted. Floors were striped into aisleways. There was a lot more light in the room. All the equipment was arranged in circles. Nothing looked the same. There was no going back to how it was. We're now lean. There was no room for big piles of inventory. There's no room for it. There was only inventory for that day, for that shift. Clearly, complete change of how they operated. Everyone knew we were serious and there's no going back. Get on board the ship, the boat that you're going to talk about in Good to Great. Get on board or get off, because this ship is setting sail and it's going this direction with lean. It was hugely powerful. And you can imagine going from kind of a dark and dingy place to a bright, shiny place, and new paint, everything looked good. I can tell you when I got to Lamar in '98, this place didn't look very good. Promise you. Old dingy dormitories, buildings that look like they need to be mowed down, which have since been mowed down. And now you come, there's a $20 million gym. Absolutely fabulous if you haven't been over there. Incredible, beautiful building. And you have a new dining hall, and you have 5 new dorms, relatively speaking, that look appealing. If you're 18 years old and you drive up and you see these beautiful dorms, thinking, wow, okay, I'd like to live there. So it looks entirely different. So you're creating this environment where you're telling everyone there's a physical change to match the culture change. Yes? And for some of you that are sitting in this room in the fall of 13 that are not graduating this semester, maybe you graduate later on, and you're going to see the transformation that takes place in Cherry Building, that we've got a new a classroom that's going to be completely renovated to the tune of probably $300,000 or more, one room. And you start going into that room and think about, wow, things are changing in the industrial department, aren't they? Well, yeah. You have a physical reminder of how things are, and that's what this is getting at. And if I was going to make a change of an organization, I would try to make a physical change as well, if I could afford to do it. Paint, usually pretty cheap. Ceiling tiles are cheap. And that's really all it took. Ceiling tiles, paint, and a few extra lights. So you're hoping that you're promoting cooperation and teamwork. And one of the last things we're going to speak about is we've done all this work to improve culture, try to make some changes, and finally I'm getting to the one that you might have put at the very top. Involving people. Now you could argue that I could have involved people in changing how the administrative systems. I probably would not do that if I were you, because those are changing the rules. I would probably, get them involved in the last 3 boxes. But you're attempting to improve people, which means I'm going to train them, and I'm going to involve them in decision-making in something that goes on in the organization. Now, what have I said about cooperation or commitment versus compliance? What have I said all semester?
Ownership.
How do I get compliance?
People decision making.
If I tell them what to do, I'm going to get compliance. If I involve them, I'll get, hopefully, commitment. And that's what they learned about in the sausage article, right? They're going to own that sausage because they're making it and tasting it. So that's what we're getting at in this last piece here. Right? So, what it's saying in slide 32, I'm going to increase the competency of people to perform their task. I've got to train people. That's what that's saying. I need to train people and increase their skill set. You will find training to be one of the things you're going to go to time and time again as something you want to make better. You want to improve training. Set up training programs. Put training as part of their measurement reward system. I can guarantee you're going to want to raise your skill sets for employees. Okay? Increasing people's involvement in decision making. The classic example is the sausage article and people tasting the sausage. And there's twofold there. One is I got them involved in deciding something about what they do, but you also took an oversight type of auditing process and gave it to their hands. They're not deciding the color of the paint on the wall. Right? They're performing a quality control function. Agreed? This is an important thing. It's not a trivial thing. It's not deciding what the lunch menu is going to be for next month. This is kind of an important quality decision. So if you're going to involve them, make it mean something. I've seen quality committees work very well. Getting people involved in improving quality safety committees work very well. Why do you think a safety committee works well? What are you doing with that?
Saving their life.
Big time, right? What else?
You're saving the company money also.
How am I doing that, Joey?
Preventing injuries that cost things. I mean, if you lose of any type of injury that requires medical care, there's a cost to the company.
Yes, I mean, you're looking at trying to improve their safety, but you're giving them an opportunity to have a voice in their own safety. Two things. One is they're going to notice safety items that you'll never pick up on because they're out there doing it. And two, you're giving them a voice in actually changing that. Okay, and so it's twofold. One is you're using their expertise at a very detailed level, and then getting them involved in making those changes. So you could ask for volunteers. You could encourage certain people to get involved, and maybe you rotate people in and out every year. Maybe a third of the committee will be new people. You keep some of the more experienced people on, and then a third of the people will be new every year. So you bring in new talent. It's very powerful the way that can work. Okay, so, and you're attempting to use their knowledge and experience. You got a lot of knowledge and experienced people out there, and it's not being utilized like it could be. And so that's an opportunity that getting people involved will do. You have to remember that the people out there know that equipment better than you because they're doing it all the time. Now think about this. This is a silly example. Okay? Think about what age were you when you started picking out your own clothes to wear? Do you remember what age you were when that happened? You wanted a say in what you wore that day, yes? There's a certain age when that starts to happen, right? When you get to decide what you get to wear to school that day or where to work or whatever, right? People want to have a say. It's a natural thing, yes? And they've got knowledge that you need. So what mechanism are you going to put in place? Is it a committee? Teresa mentioned some sort of hotline. Maybe you have a bulletin board. I don't know. Okay, but you want to be able to use that talent and skill. Okay? One of the things you're talking about, we're hoping to get people to take more responsibility like we did in the sausage article by getting them involved. You're hoping to get better decisions because they've got the detailed knowledge about what's going on. Okay? You're hoping that all those great ideas that they have, they'll tell you about it and you can implement it. That's what you're hoping. Okay? And one of the key things about culture change is it does take quite a bit of time. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's going to take several years to get going, more than likely. And so you have to be patient. I think you read from the sausage article, how long did it really take to get that happening?
Several years. 5 years.
I mean, he started in 1980, and then how long did it really take for him to realize the results?
5 years. I think it was 5 years.
At least 5 years, yeah. It was some significant period of time. And what's, of course, the beauty of that article is he admits his own mistakes and writes about it. Most articles you read about an example company, they rarely admit their mistakes. Okay, they always talk about the good things. Right? Okay. So that's going to conclude our culture talk and the topics that you see between now and test 2. are going to support things we've talked about the past couple of times. Okay? So we've got the ZAP book that will also support things that you're seeing in these slides, and we've got a couple of presentations that are going to support that.